What is up, everybody? This is your boy, Teran Rodriguez, bringing you another edition of Set Point. We have ourselves a crazy show today as the NCAA Tournament Men's Volleyball bracket has been released. Which teams are in, which teams missed the cut, and which teams won and lost in their respective conference tournaments. Also, USC Beach Volleyball continues to win as they dispatch UCLA for the second straight week. Are the Trojans really for real, or will they get the best of some of these opposing teams come NCAA tournament time? And how about Orange Coast College winning its eighth state championship in the 3C2A final, beating Long Beach City? How did the Pirates do it, and what went right for them? Hand me a ball, set to net, because I'm about to start you off some volleyball action here on Set. This is Teran Rodriguez bringing you another edition of Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. And welcome all to another edition of Set Point. Thank you all for joining me on this beautiful Sunday afternoon. And yes, I've decided to have Set Point on Sunday just because the NCAA Men's Volleyball Tournament bracket was released today. It was released at 10 a.m. via the NCAA.com website. And I thought, it's a good idea to just get it out of the way just because tomorrow I'm going to be busy and unfortunately, I won't be able to do Set Point, but here is Set Point. We are going to give you that great volleyball fix on this beautiful Sunday fun day. And without any further delay, let's get on into the volleyball action. But first and foremost, we have a word from our sponsors. IE Sports Radio is proud to call the Southern California Warriors semi-pro football team the official sponsor of IE Sports Radio. The world of semi-pro sports is unlike any other sports organization. Players pay to play in hopes of so many different outcomes, whether it's playing to get filmed to trap for professional teams, big-time colleges, or just playing to stay in shape. No matter what, all semi-pro players have one thing in common, and that's playing for the love of the game. The SoCal Warriors have been on a quest to earn titles and give players second chances since 2017. Whether you're in Southern California or anywhere in the world, give semi-pro sports a chance if you love your sport. You may get the second chance you've been waiting for as an athlete. You can follow them on Twitter at SoCal Warriors, on Instagram at Southern California_Warriors, and on Facebook by typing in the word Southern California, then Warriors. IE Sports Radio is available on Twitter and on Instagram at IE Sports Radio, and on Facebook by typing in the word IE, then Sports, and then Radio. They also have their own website, www.iesportsradio.com. And when you go to that website, you'll see a Patreon link there, which starts out at $5 a month. And this donation gets you a shout from all 32 of our shows. Yes, we have 32 shows yet again because we've added a few more shows to our roster. Higher tiers include IE Sports Radio merchandise, access to IESRU, the podcasting university of IE Sports Radio, and even a chance to be featured on IE Sports Radio's flagship show, The Defining Moment with Larry B. Because for the past 7.5 years, going on 8 years coming this May, IE Sports Radio has been bringing you amazing content ranging from interviewing legendary athletes, coaches, and other authorized media personnel, to building tailor-made shows dedicated to all major sports cities around the country. All the while, IE Sports Radio has continued to be by the fans and for the fans, and with your help, we are ready to take the next biggest step. Thank you, everyone, for continuing to support IE Sports Radio and for making it your direct feed for all that sports. And this Thursday, the NFL Draft is that day, and IE Sports Radio is excited to announce its third annual mock draft challenge. The rules are simple. Predict all 32 first-round picks to the best of your ability. No trades, no modifications, no tricks, none of that. The participant who has the best mock draft will receive a shout from all of IE Sports Radio shows and a choice of an IE Sports Radio hat or t-shirt. For more information or to submit your mock draft, please reach out to Mike Pat at Let's1_IESR. His Twitter account will be in the description of this show. Good luck to everyone that participates, and the deadline is vastly approaching, so if I were you, I'd get that in as soon as possible. Also have to give a shout to IE Sports Radio's Patreon supporters, Marcus Losgreat and Bay Area Raised Apparel. Also, we have to give a shout out to IE Sports Radio's Fan of the Month, Marcy_Vargas88. She is a Packers fan hailing from Mexico. And without any further delay, let's get on into that NCAA volleyball action. So we had lots and lots of craziness when it came to these conference tournaments. Lots of madness, lots of upsets. We'll start with the first one in terms of chronological order. We'll start off with the first upset that happened, starting off with Purdue of Fort Wayne versus Loyola of Chicago. So Purdue of Fort Wayne surprisingly moved up into the top 15 after upsetting McKendree in 4 sets last weekend. Loyola of Chicago, the number 11 team in the nation, trying to make sure they advance to the MIVA finals, where they will face the winner of Lewis and the winner of Lewis and Ball State, just because Loyola was one of the favorites to win the MIVA, and they're trying to keep up their reputation. So early on, all these sets were very close. As early on, the Ramblers started off with a 3-0 lead, but only to see the Mastodons bounce back to take a 6-5 lead. And from there, neither team led by any more than 2 points throughout the next 48 serves. And with Loyola up 30-29, it looked as if the Ramblers were going to take that first set. But then the Dons were able to score the next 3 points and secure the opening set. And they actually got a big contribution from Rico Wardlow, who had 2 out of the final 3 points for Purdue of Fort Wayne. So everyone in Loyola in the Gentile arena was probably wondering, okay, we lost that first set. No big deal. Let's bounce back. In the second set, Loyola was off to another great start as they led 4-0, but Purdue of Fort Wayne didn't give up. They eventually scratched and clawed their way back. They settled in. They chipped away at the lead. It was 22-22, and with that score being tied, Purdue of Fort Wayne eventually scored 3 of the last 4 points to win the second set 25-23, going up 2-0 in the match, and everyone at the Gentile Arena was stunned to see Loyola just not being themselves. It's like Loyola actually avoided McKendree to make well, no, I wouldn't say that. Loyola fans were probably hoping that Loyola would not face McKendree in the semifinals, because McKendree had actually beaten Loyola of Chicago twice this season. Purdue of Fort Wayne, on the other hand, they did not win against Loyola at any point of the season in terms of the MIVA. So everyone in Chicago was just stunned. Loyola did lead in set 3, 15-12 at the media timeout, but the Mastodons responded with a 4-1 run to tie it up at 16. Wardlow and John Diedrich was just leading the way, pounding kill after kill. Wardlow had himself a big game. Diedrich had himself a big game. And this one needed a deuce game. It was 25-25, and then the Mastodons routed off the last 2 points with a kill from Cade Bottinger and Vicente Ibarra, and that was the match right there. Purdue of Fort Wayne stunned Loyola of Chicago on the road, and for the first time since 2007, the Mastodons are in the MIVA final as they sweep Loyola of Chicago. Purdue of Fort Wayne was led by John Diedrich, who had 16 kills. He hit 387. Rico Wardlow had 15 kills. He had 0 hitting errors and hit 625. Vicente Ibarra had 12 kills. He hit 321. As a team, PFW hit 388. While their blocking was nowhere near good, they did dig the ball really well, and they limited their service errors, which was very nice. So all in all for PFW, they really played a complete game despite Loyola giving them their best shot. And those sets could have gone either way. Notice how Loyola had set point at 30-29 set 1. If Loyola takes that first set, it's a much different outcome or a much different perspective because Loyola's probably feeling good going into that intermission up 1-0. But PFW, to their credit, they round off the next 3 points. Rico Wardlow really stepped up. And overall, PFW just they earned the win. Nothing against Loyola, but I just think that maybe they looked a little too far ahead, and maybe they underestimated PFW just because nobody really took PFW all that seriously until the final. Well, or until the quarterfinals when they upset McKendree. But for Loyola, this was kind of a bad loss for them, just because this pretty much ended the season. They knew the only way they were going to get into the NCAA tournament was to win their conference tournament, and unfortunately they did not. Loyola was led by Parker Van Buren and Cole Schlothauer, who each had 17 kills. Henry Payne chipped in 9 kills, and Jimmy Meinhardt added 6 kills. As a team, Loyola hit 375. Like I said, the blocks weren't all that high for either team. Loyola had 5 blocks compared to Purdue of Fort Wayne's 2. So the hitting percentages were pretty much in the high 300s. The digs were in favor of PFW having 47 compared to Loyola's 42. In terms of hitting errors, Loyola only had 10 compared to PFW's 11. But what really hurt Loyola was the serving. They missed 14 serves. They did have 3 aces, but compared to Purdue of Fort Wayne's 4 aces and 8 service errors, that kind of is a little bit of an anomaly of how that pretty much kind of helped Purdue of Fort Wayne out throughout most of the match. So all in all, Loyola didn't play bad, but they left a lot of points on the table, and to their discredit and to their dismay, they are pretty much out of the NCAA tournament. Their season is done. So that was just the opening act of all the craziness that happened in the NCAA men's volleyball world in terms of the conference tournaments. So we jump to Thursday. We now head up east to State College, Pennsylvania, where we saw Princeton and Penn State facing off one another. Top seed Penn State and number 2 in the nation, Penn State, taking on Princeton. Penn State looking to punch its ticket to the EIVA final, while Princeton, a team that didn't have a season last year due to the Ivy League just straight up canceling everything in terms of all sports, looking to try to get back to the championship. So the first set was very one-sided. I don't know what Princeton did correctly in that first set, but they did it. They basically were on top of it. So the first set, it was basically just, it wasn't even close. Penn State didn't even tie it or lead. Princeton had firm control over it. They led 10-7, and while Penn State wasn't out of the set, Princeton eventually just pulled away and won it 25-16. That really stunned everybody at the rec hall. So set 2, Princeton started off a little hot as they had a 6-0 run, which turned a 4-2 deficit into an 8-4 lead. They eventually led 13-9, but Penn State went on a pair of 3-0 runs to go up 19-17. But you have to give credit to Princeton. They battled back. They tied it up at 23 apiece. Princeton had set point at 27-26, and despite Penn State doing all that it can to keep the ball in play, they were eventually able to get the kill from Parker Dixon to give them the set 28-26. And every Penn State fan in Rec Hall was stunned to see that Penn State, a team that had not lost any conference game, go up 2-0. And every Princeton fan was probably up on their feet. So the third set, Princeton started off hot early. They had a 3-0 run, which turned their 2-0 deficit to a 3-2 lead. They also went up 9-7, and eventually they went up 13-9, and they were thinking sweep. But remember, you're facing the number 2 team in the nation on its home floor. Penn State needed a spark, and they went up 16-15, despite having to face a triple block, which tied it up at 16-16. Both teams basically battled it out, as Penn State did not want to go home. They did not want to lose on their home floor in straight sets. They led 22-21, and eventually Penn State was able to rattle off 3 of the next 5 points to take set 3, 25-23. The fourth set, Princeton took an early 5-3 lead, and they actually led 14-9. Actually, Penn State used a 5-0 run to turn the tables. It was tied up at 9-9, and then Penn State went on a 5-0 run to go up 14-9, and eventually it wasn't really remotely close. But in the first half of the set, it was tight early on, but then Penn State just found its way and just grinded it out and just dominated that fourth set in the second half, winning it 25-17. And suddenly Penn State and Princeton were going 5, and all the Penn State fans with their jaws on the ground were basically cheering now. Penn State, despite losing the first point of the set, responded with a 3-0 run, leading 3-1. They eventually led 5-4, and after that it was back and forth as Penn State led 9-8. But then Princeton, to their credit, went on a 4-0 run to go up 12-9, and eventually Princeton just had control of that set after they went on that 4-0 run. Penn State could not get any closer, as they got to as close as within 2, but then Penn State had a hitting error which gave Princeton the match, and it was an upset in Penn State as Princeton, the Tigers, remember, a team that did not have a season last year, upset the number 2 team in the nation. And this was actually the first win for Princeton in 19 tries. That's how long it's been since Princeton last beat Penn State. As Davidson says, nice job, Princeton. Princeton was led by Ben Harrington, who had 21 kills. He hit .415, while James Hartley added 12 kills. Parker Dixon chipped in 9 kills for Princeton, who hit .319. What really helped them was their blocking. They outblocked Penn State 12.5-6. That's quite a bit of blocking, if you ask me. And despite getting outdug, their defense was just on a tear. They only got outdug by 3, and despite not having one player in double digits in terms of digs, their digs were really spread out. Princeton also had 7 service aces compared to Penn State's 5, while they barely won the service error battle in terms of having fewest service errors. As for Penn State, they were led by Cal Fisher, who had 17 kills. He also hit .414. Brett Wildman added 16 kills, and Toby Ezionu added 10 kills. As a team, Penn State hit .289, which isn't bad, but it's kind of well below their average, as they're normally hitting in like the 300s. And for them to lose at home is really mind-blowing, if you ask me, just because Penn State has kind of been their home sweet home. Unfortunately for Penn State, they just fell apart. Michael Valenzi added 9 kills for Penn State, as once again, Princeton just had their way, and it's really surprising to see Princeton, a team that was trending above 500 going into this tournament, or barely trending above 500, just pulling off this big win, as Princeton was the number 4 seed. They managed to get by their quarterfinal, upset Penn State to advance to the EIVA final, where they actually will play NJIT, which beat fellow Ivy League team Harvard in 4 sets. I should also mention that in the MIVA, Ball State dispatched of Lewis in straight sets to face Purdue of Fort Wayne. Now, the craziness does not stop there. We all thought that Princeton upsetting Penn State was the craziness. Oh no. This next matchup took it one step higher, as this matchup featured Stanford versus UCLA in the MPSF semifinals. UCLA had themselves a bye, which gave them the home court advantage and a ticket to the MPSF semifinals. Stanford, on the other hand, they finished sub 500 in terms of the regular season and in the MPSF. They were coming off of a big win over Grand Canyon as they upset the 4-seed the 4-seed Lopes as they faced a giant of UCLA at Pauley Pavilion. So for the first set, this was kind of it wasn't a blowout, but for Stanford, they really took charge in the first set, as the first set they never trailed, which is rather surprising. I was very surprised to see Stanford just not trailing in that first set. As they took the first set 25-21, it really did not seem that... It looked as if UCLA was just not comfortable. I really thought that UCLA wasn't comfortable in that opening set. The second set was a lot tighter, as there were 7 ties, 4 lead changes. It was just back and forth. Stanford had the advantage, and then UCLA had the advantage. Eventually, Stanford took the second set 25-23, and then they found themselves up 2-0 over UCLA, and every Bruin fan was stunned at Pauley Pavilion. They were wondering, what in the world is going on here? And they were wondering, why were they doing this? Why was our team just not showing up? And it was really surprising. So the third set, UCLA needed a spark, and they kind of got it, as they took the third set 25-21, 7 ties, 2 lead changes. UCLA controlled that set for the most part. They really controlled the fourth set, as they never trailed and there was only 1 tie, as UCLA dominated the fourth set, winning it 25-15. Then it started to look a little bit normal, as UCLA was looking like their number one selves. Now for the fifth set, it was basically all Stanford for the most part. They only had a moment where they didn't lead once, and they pretty much controlled the fifth set for the most part. UCLA, to their credit, they stayed alive, but unfortunately for them, they just could not get that run where they could catch up to Stanford. As Stanford, clinching the match, they won the fifth set 15-11, and that, ladies and gentlemen, was how Stanford advanced to the MPSF Finals, as Stanford was led by Will Rotman, who had 22 kills. Ethan Hill added 13 kills, and Kevin Lamp chipped in 12 kills. As a team, Stanford only hit 250, which is kind of surprising. Hill also, to his credit, had 0 hitting errors, as Stanford excelled in... They didn't excel too much. They had more service aces. Like, statistically, UCLA dominated the match. Like, UCLA had 11 blocks compared to Stanford's 7. They had 39 digs compared to 37 from Stanford. They hit fewer service errors. And UCLA, as a team, hit 3 of 8. And they had fewer hitting errors. They had 18 hitting errors compared to Stanford's 24. UCLA, on the other hand, was led by Kevin Coburn, who had 13 kills, while Ethan Champlin chipped in 10 kills. The kills were very distributive for UCLA, as Merrick McHenry added 9 kills, and then Grant Sloan and Guy Guinness chipped in 6 kills apiece. But like I said, UCLA just did not have its best match. Like, it felt like they were so uncomfortable, especially in that fifth set. They only had 5 kills in that fifth set compared to Stanford's 11. So overall, Stanford really showed that they were the dark horse. Last week I said Stanford could make noise, and I said that they were a dark horse. However, I didn't figure they would pull off this big of an upset. And I really have to give credit to Stanford. They really impressed. I knew there was going to be some glimmer of hope when it came to possibly winning that match, but I didn't think they would pull off the upset. I knew they were going to challenge UCLA, and to UCLA's credit, they answered the phone in sets 3 and 4, but Stanford was able to just close the door in the 5th set, and it's just quite amazing that they were able to pull that off. Keep in mind, Stanford almost had their program shut down last year. This was a Stanford team that was about to lose its program, men's volleyball program, due to budget cuts from the entire Stanford University. But they were able to keep their team, and now they are advancing to the MPSF Championship, where they will play Pepperdine, which upset USC in 4 sets. Now, I would get into that upset, but honestly, I feel that wasn't overly that was kind of expected, just because Pepperdine split its matchup against USC way early on in the season. Or not early on this season, early on in conference play. Overall, I was impressed with Pepperdine. I was not impressed with USC. They left a lot of points on the table, and for me, I think it's disappointing just because USC had a lot of potential, and looking at the matchup that they could have had against Stanford, I think they could have had a possibility of winning the MPSF. But I'll get into that later. And then the last upset we had in terms of the conference tournament playoffs before the finals was UC Irvine sweeping UC San Diego. Now, this was kind of expected just because UC Irvine has a scrappy team. I think the only problem is that they have such a young team, and they haven't really had a lineup which has been able to stay on the court altogether. Like, if you all remember my post-game interview with David Niffen, he said that this was only the second time all season that they had all of their starters on the court together. Like, last weekend marked the first time that UC Irvine had all 6 starters on the court healthy. And then they were able to use those starters against UC San Diego to upset the Tritons and advance to play Long Beach State, which eventually Long Beach State won. So in terms of every conference tournament's finals, we had, and this, I'm actually going to admit this wholeheartedly, I did not do a good job when it came to picking the conference tournament finals. So in terms of the Conference Carolina finals, that consisted of Mount Olive versus North Greenville. Okay, so I got that one right. I predicted that was going to be the final. So for the MIVA final, I predicted Ball State versus Loyola, which I'm pretty sure everyone had Loyola in their final. But unfortunately for most people that wanted Loyola in the final, they were wrong, as Purdue of Fort Wayne and Ball State was the MIVA final. The EIVA final, I predicted Penn State and NJIT. But unfortunately for Penn Staters, or for those that picked Penn State to win it all, Princeton had other plans, as Princeton upset Penn State, as they and NJIT were in the final. I think it's safe to say everyone had Penn State in the final, just because they were the number 2 team in the nation. They hadn't lost an EIVA match all season, and in their defense, they hadn't lost to Princeton in over 18 tries. So the 19th charm was the 19th time was the charm for Princeton. And then for the MPSF final, I was completely wrong. I predicted UCLA USC in the final. But for the MPSF final, it was actually Stanford and Pepperdine. So, yeah, I shouldn't have underestimated Pepperdine. But USC was playing great as of late. They were playing great volleyball, coming off of 2 wins over Grand Canyon on the road. And then they swept Concordia Irvine in the quarterfinal matchup. And they had themselves probably the best seeding. The only way they the only way their seeding could have been better is if they had got matched up with BYU or Grand Canyon, which I should also make note that BYU nearly upset Pepperdine in the quarterfinals, but then Pepperdine was able to pull out the victory in that fifth set, nearly getting reverse swept. But at the end of the day, Pepperdine won ugly despite what happened. And then the Big West Conference Tournament Final, I predicted Long Beach State versus Hawaii. That one was actually correct as well, as Long Beach State dispatched of UC Irvine and Hawaii swept away UC Santa Barbara. So those are your conference tournament finals. And I'm not going to make note of the independent team finals, just because those teams don't really get access to an at-large spot, unless, of course, their RPI and strength of schedule is really good. So I'm not going to make note of the independent conference, or not the independent conference, the independent tournament finals. So there's that. But we will jump to the first conference tournament final. That was the Conference Carolinas tournament. Mount Olive versus North Greenville. Number 3 seed versus the number 1 seed. Mount Olive was the host of this tournament, as this one took place in Mount Olive, North Carolina. And honestly, this one was quite the barn burner. I think of all of the matches, this one was probably the second best MPS, the second best conference tournament final. As the first set, it was tightly contested, as neither team could really pull away from one another early on. However, North Greenville used an 11-4 run to eventually take the lead at 20-17. And eventually North Greenville wound up they maintained their 3-point lead, and they took the opening set 25-22. As I was about to say, they took 5 of the last 5 points, or 5 of the last 10 points, but that would imply that both teams pretty much just went back and forth. So I'll give credit to Mount Olive. They played really well. They really hit the ball well early on, but for set 2, Mount Olive decided to turn the tables, and overall, North Greenville did all that they could to try to keep themselves within striking distance. Neither team led by more than 3 points, but the Trojans of Mount Olive went on a late run to eventually win set number 2, 25-23. That was a big set that Mount Olive had just won, as if they lose that second set, then they were pretty much done for, just because North Greenville is the top seed, you're at home, you're not feeling good. It would not have gone Mount Olive's way had they lost that second set. The third set was a lot more one-sided, as North Greenville pretty much just stomped all over Mount Olive, winning that third set 25-16. As I'll be honest, when it comes to the Crusaders, they really shined in that third set. They held Mount Olive to only a hitting percentage of 68, and even though they hit 244, they were very efficient when it came to hitting the ball. They had 14 kills, and the only reason why they hit 244 was because they had 41 attempts. That actually wound up being the highest number of attempts in a set. So it looked as if North Greenville was going to have their way. But the fourth set proved to be very tight, as there were 15 ties, 8 lead changes, as the Trojans of Mount Olive were just trying to just find a way to force that fifth set. They eventually went on a late 4-1 run to break a 21-20 lead and eventually take the set 25-21, forcing a fifth set. And everyone in Mount Olive was just really on their feet. They were hoping that was the spark that they needed. But to the credit of North Greenville, any sort of momentum that Mount Olive had, they flushed it down the toilet. As the fifth set was basically all North Greenville. They dominated that fifth set. They hit 643. They had 10 kills. And to their credit, Gregory Torres had himself quite the game, as he had the game-winning service ace which gave North Greenville the match 15-7 in set 5. And for the first time in Conference Carolina history, North Greenville won the Conference Carolina Tournament, which was very impressive. I thought North Greenville had that it factor. I'm not trying to take anything away from Mount Olive, but I knew North Greenville was going to win that one. They had Mount Olive's number. And nothing against Mount Olive. I think there is no shame in losing to the number 1 seed. I think Mount Olive is going to get eventually better. The whole Conference Carolinas is going to get better. I think Charleston is moving to the Conference Carolinas, according to Mark Pavlik. Either way, it was a great effort from Mount Olive. North Greenville was led by Gregory Torres, who, like I said, he had the match-winning service ace, and he had 25 kills to boot. He hit .435 as well. Diego Rosic added 16 kills, and Michael De La Cruz added 15 kills. As a team, North Greenville hit .304, which was pretty impressive. They also had 6 service aces, and they had 19 service errors, which was not bad. And despite getting outblocked, they really outdug Mount Olive 62-47. As we say hello to Cale Henderson and Larry B in the chat room. Henderson says, "What's up?" Just recapping some NCAA Conference Tournament volleyball, and Larry just says volleyball. And Larry B just missed it when I talked about USC and how they blundered against Pepperdine, but I digress. Jumping over to Mount Olive, they were led by Toby Aziz, who had 18 kills. Pedro Gonzalez added 13 kills with no hitting errors, and Luke Visgidis brothers, I'm trying to see if I'm pronouncing that right. Yes, Visgidis brothers, Luke and Eric, added 9 and 8 kills respectively. As a team, Mount Olive hit .281, which actually isn't bad considering they avoided the block. And they actually had 139 swings, and they hit fewer hitting errors than North Greenville. The problem is that they just didn't have... They were balanced. Their hitting attack was balanced, but they just didn't have that star player that shined like North Greenville did with Gregory Torres. And also what hurt Mount Olive was their serving. They missed 25 serves, and they only had 2 service aces. Now, I will give them the benefit of the doubt. They had 11 service aces compared to North Greenville's 7. But again, they got outdug 62-47. And North Greenville had 4 different players in double digits in terms of the dig category. Mount Olive only had 2 players in double digits, as Trevor Tresser had 17 digs, while Luke Visgidis added 14 digs. So, overall, again, it's no shame that Mount Olive lost, but for North Greenville, it was kind of expected they'd win that tournament. I kind of figured they would get a challenge from Mount Olive, but at the same time, North Greenville was the number 1 seed. And these 2 teams were basically the class of the Conference Carolinas, with the exception of one other team. But overall, Mount Olive knew that they didn't want to lose in embarrassing fashion on its home floor, and they did everything in their power to try to make it close. Jumping over to the MIVA tournament, we had Ball State versus Purdue of Fort Wayne, the Battle of Indiana, as both of these teams had met up with each other twice. Ball State was able to take both matches, but to the credit of PFW, they were able to push it to 5 sets the first go-around, and then they really made Ball State sweat it out when it came to the final match of the season. The first set was very tight and contested, as there were 16 ties, and honestly, both teams just traded leads. It was basically like a boxing match, just one team just going back and forth with one another, and they were exchanging blows. But to the credit of Ball State, they were able to come out on top, winning 28-26, as it was a definite nail-biter. And the fact that Ball State was able to survive and win that first set speaks to high volumes of how they were able to be resilient. I should also keep in mind that there were over 1,000 attendees, which was very impressive, considering this was a rivalry match. like, when it comes to, like, these interstate rivalry matches, you gotta throw the records out. Like, everyone knew Ball State was going to get a battle from Purdue-Fort Wayne. Now, the second set appeared to see that the Mastodons were going to be able to take charge and win the second set, as Purdue-Fort Wayne got off to a pretty impressive start. It was mainly aided by Ball State errors, but eventually Ball State went on a 7-point run, and they turned a 17-16 deficit into a 23-17 deficit. And eventually, Ball State took the second set 25-20. Then everyone in Muncie was probably breathing a sigh of relief. So Ball State was one set away from winning the conference tournament for the first time since 2002, while Purdue-Fort Wayne needed some sort of spark. But it never really came in that third set. Early on, it was tight. Like, everyone looks at that third set score, 25-16. They're all thinking, okay, this one wasn't even close. But early on, Ball State could not just pull away from Purdue-Fort Wayne. But to the credit of PFW, their backs were against the wall. They were pretty much the Cinderella of the MIVA. But unfortunately, the clock struck midnight in that third set as Ball State just continued to ride the coattails of Caleb Jenis and Angelos Mandelaris, as Ball State eventually took the third set by that score of 25-16. And for the first time in 20 years, Ball State won the MIVA tournament, which was very impressive. They were doing this in honor of the one who founded Ball State men's volleyball, Don Shondell. So it's a very, very heartwarming story when you look at it in the perspective of Ball State. They lost Don Shondell earlier in the year, and the fact that they were able to win it for him and his family is quite amazing. Ball State was led by Caleb Jenis, who had 18 kills. Mandelaris added 14 kills, and Vanis Buckholes had 7 kills. I'm also going to kind of talk about Vanis Buckholes for a little bit. I actually got to see him play in high school, but I'm going to digress on that. Ball State had 5 service aces, and they only missed 8 serves, which is quite impressive. And they barely outblocked Purdue-Fort Wayne 10-9, and they barely got outdug by Purdue-Fort Wayne. As a team, Ball State hit 308 compared to PFW's 232, which is not too bad if you ask me. When you're hitting above the 300s, you're doing something correct. And when you're holding your opponent to under 300 and maybe even under 250, that's when you're starting to click. PFW was led by John Diedrich, who had 10 kills. Vicente Ibarra added 9 kills. Enrico Wardlow added 7 kills. One thing that really hurt PFW was that they had 0 service aces, and they missed 9 serves. You have to score when it comes to serving, whether it's getting a service ace or just pressurizing the other team to just free ball it back over to your side. All in all, for PFW, it was kind of expected to see Ball State win. I just didn't expect them to win in straight sets. But I think the clock did strike midnight for Purdue-Fort Wayne. But you have to love what the Mastodons did all season long. They upset McKendree. They upset Loyola of Chicago. They went toe-to-toe with Ball State in that first set. Once again, if they take that first set, it's a whole different perspective. PFW probably is feeling good going up 1-0 heading into set number 2, and they're probably draining the life of the Ball State fans. And overall, I think Ball State just showed how dominant they were. There's a reason why they were top 10 throughout most of the year, and they were actual contenders. Jumping on over to the EIVA Conference Tournament Final, we had NJIT versus Princeton. Both teams pulling upsets in their semifinals. NJIT looking to get back to the conference tournament, while Princeton, a team that missed all of last season, was looking to get back into the NCAA tournament. So for Princeton, this started off in the first set. They didn't really able to get any sort of traction, in my honest opinion. I felt that NJIT, despite having to ward off a bunch of Princeton rallies, they were able to just hold off Princeton. It was tied up at 19-19. Princeton led 21-20, but then NJIT went on a 5-2 run to end the first set, winning it 25-23. And that's one of those close sets that could have gone either way type of sets. And then the second set, it was also very tight as Princeton jumped out to a 9-6 lead. Parker Dixon was doing his thing. But you have to give credit to NJIT. They got themselves quite a good game from Julian Meisner. They also got other good games from a few other players. Princeton led 17-14, and they eventually had set point at 24-23. But you have to give credit to the Highlanders. They tied it up at 24-24. But to the discredit of NJIT, they kept missing serves so late in the set. They cannot afford to miss serves going into the later stages of the set, as that eventually paved the way for Princeton to take the second set 27-25. And that was a crucial set that they just won. Had they not won that set, once again, NJIT is probably feeling good being up 2-0, just because NJIT has that scrappiness. They are probably, like, I've been basically riding NJIT throughout most of the season, and Princeton just didn't have that level of consistency until probably late in the season. So the third set, NJIT jumped out to a 4-0 lead, and then Princeton would eventually use a run of their own to get within one. And honestly, it was just another blow-by-blow matchup. It was basically a set full of runs. One team went on a 3-0 run, then a 4-0 run, then a 3-0 run, then a 4-0 run, then 4-0 run, then 3-0 run. It was 16-16, and then Princeton eventually took the lead at 17-16. NJIT took the lead at 23-22. It looked as if NJIT was about to win that set, but credit to Princeton, they scored the last 3 points to take the third set. They eventually took the third set by scoring off of a triple block. That gave them the set 3, 27-25. And Princeton was feeling really good about themselves, despite having to grind it out in that third set. There were 11 ties and 5 lead changes. And overall, Princeton, they really showed up in that third set. They came alive late, and that was crucial because sometimes you're either, like Alan Knipe said, you're going to win ugly. It doesn't have to be pretty, it doesn't have to be ugly, but as long as you're winning a set or you're winning a match, that's all that really matters. And that fourth set, winning set 3, really helped energize Princeton because they never trailed, never tied, and they pretty much rode the coattails of that energy from winning set 3 as they won set 4, 25-18, and they were the EIVA champions, which was quite impressive. First time since 2019 when they won the EIVA. Now, you're probably thinking, well, that wasn't too far, but you have to remember, 2020, season was canceled due to COVID. 2021, Princeton didn't have a season. This year, Princeton is back on top. And what I mean by back on top, I mean they're back when it comes to being one of the perennial top teams in the EIVA. Because obviously Penn State dominated this year, but then Princeton was basically the David versus the Penn State's Goliath. And for them to eventually close the door against NJIT, a team that made the EIVA final last year, is quite impressive. Princeton was led by Ben Harrington, who had 24 kills, while James Hartley added 12 kills. Parker Dixon added 9 kills. As a team, Princeton hit 328, which was quite impressive. The three-headed monster, Harrington, Hartley, and Dixon, all came up big, as Princeton also had 5 service aces compared to NJIT's 2. They also outdug NJIT 37-29, which is kind of the reason why their hitting percentage was very high. The main thing that really helped Princeton was their blocking. They outblocked NJIT 16 to 8.5, or 16.5 to 18.5, which that was kind of what really keyed Princeton to help winning the match for them. And overall, Princeton deserved to win. Now, part of me feels crushed for NJIT. Like I said, I was highly invested in NJIT this year. I was kind of hoping they would make the NCAA tournament, but unfortunately they just ran out of gas, and they just didn't have any more comeback magic after that third set. They were led by Julian Meisner, who had 19 kills, while Alessandro Negri, Martin De Chavarria, and Jens Feltus added 10 kills. Or each added 10 kills. As a team, NJIT only hit 250, which is not that good. And I should also make note that Julian Meisner hit a whittling 227. He had 9 hitting errors, which does not help their matters. But I will say this about NJIT. They had a promising season. I think they'll get better as the years go on. I should say this about Penn State, however. I hate to jump back to Penn State, but Penn State only loses 2 players. They do lose their starting libero, Will Bantle, but they return practically everybody because most of Penn State's players are taking their 5th year of eligibility. Going to speed right along here through the Stanford-Pepperdine match. So Stanford and Pepperdine were meeting one another just as everybody predicted. Pepperdine looking to win the MPSF tournament for the first time since 2019, while Stanford trying to win the MPSF tournament for the first time since 2014. So for the first 2 sets, Pepperdine really took charge. They showed why they deserved to be in the MPSF championship, as they took the first 2 sets 25-20, 25-19. The first set was rather tight. However, Pepperdine was able to pull away late in the first set. And then the second set was more so of Pepperdine dominating. However, give credit to Stanford. They really strut their stuff in set 3. They never trailed. Despite Pepperdine not being out of the set at any point, Stanford took the third set 25-22. Then in the fourth set, it was tight early on. Stanford couldn't really pull away, but then Pepperdine just could not catch up to Stanford as Stanford won the fourth set 25-22. It looked as if that Stanford had regained that momentum, and Stanford was basically having the why not us mentality. But for Pepperdine, they decided to shut the door on them. They never trailed. The closest that Stanford got was having the set tied at 7-7. But other than that, Pepperdine was able to use a 5-0 run, which pretty much locked up Pepperdine's chances of losing the set, as they eventually won the set 15-12. As give credit to Stanford, they tried to make a late run in that 5th set, but to Pepperdine's credit, they really got a big game from Alex Gettinger, Spencer Wickens, and Anderson Fuller, along with Jalen Jasper. Spencer Wickens led Pepperdine in kills with 16, while Gettinger added 15. Jalen Jasper added 14 kills, while Anderson Fuller chipped in 10 kills. Bryce Dvorak, Mr. Stat Stuffer, had 50 assists, 3 kills, and 6 digs. He was named the tournament's MVP, and Jacob Steele, despite having a forgettable night, he was also named to the all-tournament team as well. Stanford was led by Will Rotman, who had 22 kills. Kevin Lamp added 14 kills, and Ethan Hill chipped in 8 kills. As a team, Stanford hit 291 compared to Pepperdine's 300, which was not bad. I thought they really performed well. The 5th set kind of was what, I wouldn't say tore them apart, but I think what really killed them was having only 1 service ace and a grand total of 24 service errors. Like I said, you cannot be missing a bunch of serves like that. It does not work out for you. You will lose more times than not. What else hurt Stanford was getting outdug 45-28. Though Stanford did dominate in the blocking category, as they won that category by a grand total of 12-7. But it wasn't enough, as Pepperdine was able to win the MPSF, which was quite impressive. Everyone had Pepperdine as probably the favorite to win the regular season MPSF tournament, or the MPSF regular season championship. But as Vinny Lopes of Off the Block said on the NCAA Tournament show, Pepperdine had themselves an up and down season. One week they would have themselves a good win. And then the next week they followed that up with a bad loss. And they had a bunch of iffy losses. And some people were probably wondering, why is Pepperdine in the top 10? They should not be top 10. But they deserve to be in the top 10. They pulled off the win over USC. And overall, Pepperdine is going dancing. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter what you do, what you didn't do. It's what you did do. And for Pepperdine, they were able to do the darn thing and win the MPSF. Now, as for the final conference tournament, the best for last, Long Beach State versus Hawaii, this was best, but it wasn't better than the MPSF tournament. So, early in the first set, it was contested. 16 ties, 5 lead changes. Hawaii and Long Beach State was doing all that they can to just try to give each other the lead. I always say that Long Beach State is one of the tougher teams to put away in a set, but Hawaii is a very close second, as Hawaii took that first set 27-25. They had to dodge a couple of Long Beach State set points, but eventually they were able to take that first set. Then the second set, there were 13 ties, 2 lead changes, but just like the first set, Hawaii dodged one of Long Beach State's set points and eventually had a few set points of their own. They even won a challenge, which put them ahead 26-25, and that's a great challenge from Charlie Wade. Great judgment on his part. Eventually, Hawaii won the second set 28-26. Basically, Hawaii and Long Beach State were going to be in contested sets throughout the entire match. Then in the third set, Hawaii was leading most of the way. Long Beach State had a few leads here and there, but Hawaii was just taking charge. Can I also mention that this match was played at Simplify Arena at the Stan Sheriff Center, and I will tell you all this. There was a grand total of 6,636 fans in attendance for this Hawaii Long Beach State men's volleyball match. What's the word? I'm not going to say hype the crowd was, but that's how much home court advantage meant to Hawaii. Now, obviously Long Beach State had themselves quite a bit of a crowd at Long Beach when the two teams played one another. But for this matchup, Hawaii and its fans cranked up the intensity to 11. So overall, the crowd's momentum helped Hawaii edge out Long Beach State in the third set 25-23 as they were able to take it off of a kill from, I want to say it was Spiros Chakas. Yes, Spiros Chakas was the one that had the kill. And Hawaii is back on top in terms of the Big West Conference Tournament, as they won the conference tournament in straight sets. Now, all 3 sets were contested, and all 3 sets could have gone either way. But you have to give credit to Hawaii. They really slowed Long Beach State down. They hit 368 and were led by Chakas and Dimitrios Mouchilas, who each had 16 kills. Guilherme Voss added 7 kills along with Chaz Galloway. And overall, I think that 5-set win over UC Irvine kind of woke Hawaii up. Hawaii also outblocked Long Beach State 8-6. They outdug them 35-32, which is kind of impressive. Despite having more service errors than Long Beach State, Hawaii really made up for it in terms of hitting the ball really well. I also got 5 kills from Cole Hogland. Jakob Telle, the Big West Conference Tournament MVP, had 43 assists, 2 kills, and 11 digs. Brett Sheward also chipped in 9 digs as well. Long Beach State was led by Alex Nikolov, who had 19 kills. I imagine he'll probably be the National Freshman of the Year. That's just my prediction. But that was pretty much the entire offense. Spencer Olivier only had 8 kills, even though he hit 375. Clark Godbold, who celebrated his birthday the day before, had 6 kills. All in all, for Long Beach State, they didn't play bad, but what really hurt them was they had no experience of playing at Hawaii. Every player that played at Hawaii in the MPSF tournament, the Big West Conference tournament, had experience. They all graduated. All those players that played at Hawaii, they all graduated, and not one of Long Beach State's players had that experience. Now, obviously, they were on the team of when Long Beach State had to play at Hawaii, but they didn't have that experience. And that is key right there. If you don't have the experience of facing a raucous and loud, spirited Hawaii crowd, you are not going to have success. Just because it's so tough to beat Hawaii at Hawaii. Hawaii did not lose a match at Stan Sheriff Center or Simplify Arena. Either way, Hawaii was a perfect 18 for 18 when it came to their home matches. And overall, I think Hawaii showed why they are such a powerhouse on its home floor. And you have to give credit to the fans, too. I said this on Twitter last night. I was live tweeting late at night. Home court advantage is so crucial for Long Beach State and for Hawaii. So for those two, whoever has home court advantage is pretty much going to have the advantage of winning. But the future looks bright for both these teams. Hawaii, like I said, they start 4 to 5 sophomores and 3 to 4 juniors, while Long Beach State rolls out a mixed bag. They only have 1 senior on their team, and sometimes they're rolling without a senior on the court, and they have to have like other players step up, such as Mason Briggs, and he's only a sophomore. Spencer Olivier is a junior. Alex Nikolov, he had himself a big night. Clark Godbold, he was big as well, even though, he was big on his birthday in the UC Irvine match, but he wasn't big against Long Beach State, or he wasn't big against Hawaii. So overall, both teams have a lot to learn, but that was pretty much that right there when it came to the Big West Conference tournament. Since the postseason is pretty much underway, there is no top 15 that we'll be going over. So we're actually going to jump ourselves to a commercial break. When we come back, we will have some NCAA Beach Volleyball talk, and we'll also have some 3C2A men's volleyball to recap. And then we also will be breaking down the NCAA men's volleyball bracket. So you're listening to Set Point here on IS Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that sports. We'll be right back after this.
From the shores of the Puget Sound to the rushing waters of the Columbia River, stretching across the Great Cascades, and on IE Sports Radio lives the Northwest Territory Sports Show, hosted by me, Brad Buckingham. On this show, I cover all the great collegiate and professional sports teams that we have here in the Pacific Northwest. Of course, I'm talking about the Seattle Seahawks, Seattle Mariners, Sounders, and even the Seattle Kraken. But I can't forget all of that is good in Oregon either. I got the Trailblazers, the Oregon Ducks, the Beavers, even the Timbers, and much, much more. You can listen to the show every Sunday from 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern, noon to 1 p.m. Pacific on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
What's up, sports fans? Are you looking for the latest on Northern California sports? Then take a trip out west with me, your host, Gina G, on Reppin' the NorCal Sports, right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. I'll be bringing it to you all the way live every Monday at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. And it's always a packed show. I'll bring you everything Dynastic 49ers, the bite of the San Jose Sharks, torture of the San Francisco Giants, the Golden State Warriors that we still believe. Then take you across the bay to the rise and grind of the Oakland A's. I've got you covered on college ball from the Cal Bears to the Stanford Cardinal, so that no matter what, reppin' in NorCal sports is always reppin' the Bay. So if you bleed red and gold, or you're looking to keep an eye out west in them thar hills, don't miss me, Gina G, on reppin' in NorCal sports. Catch me every Monday at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern, and I'll have your fandom repped harder than a trio of defenders guarding Stephen Curry before his buzzer beater is Gucci.
Back with segment number 2 of Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. Definitely do check out Northwest Territory Sports, which went on earlier in the day, went on at 11 a.m. Pacific time. It always goes on every Sunday at 11 a.m. Pacific time. Brad Buckingham does an amazing job with his show. He talks about all things Northwest Territory sports, such as the Oregon Ducks, the Oregon State Beavers, the Seattle Sounders, the Seattle Seahawks, the Seattle Mariners, all that good stuff. And Gina G also does a great job with her show, Reppin' to NorCal Sports. She talks all things Northern California sports, such as Stanford, the Golden State Warriors, which were playing while the show was going on, the San Francisco 49ers, the San Francisco Giants, all that good stuff. So, I digress, however. Definitely do check out all of our other shows. We even have some new shows coming on later on in the week, so be on the lookout for that. Let's jump on into segment number 2 of Set Point. We are 1 hour and 7 minutes into this show. I won't try to stall out too much. So we'll start with some NCAA Beach Volleyball. So it was business as usual for USC. They had one more match of the regular season. They played UCLA on their senior day, and they didn't disappoint. They wound up winning 3-2, but the match was well decided way before whatchamacallit, way before all the matches were all completed. Like, they clinched the match after their third meet was done, or they clinched the meet after their third match was done. And this is just another credit to how talented and deep that USC is. And I think USC is really starting to roll and figure things out. And that's scary for other teams, just because USC, they're obviously the reigning champions, but if they're figuring things out sooner and rather than later, I think that could be a deadly combination. Now, they obviously have the Pac-12 tournament, but no matter what, USC should be a lock for the tournament. The only way they don't get into the tournament is if they lose, and then they lose in the first round of the competitors bracket. And all in all, for USC, they just are they're well-rounded altogether. They have the Norse twins, Haley Harward, Tina Gradina, Sammy Slater, Julia Scholes. The list goes on and on. And I think that's what really is impressive about this USC team. And remember, they had themselves a 4-0 weekend last weekend when they beat LMU barely. They beat Cal Poly, they beat UCLA, and then they thumped Florida State. So I think for this USC team, they're starting to come alive at the best time, just because when it comes to the later stages of the regular season, that's when you want to come alive. Now, when they head into the Pac-12 tournament, they're obviously going to need to play their best. But I think they're starting to show their best, and they're starting to show everyone what damage they could do going into the Pac-12 tournament. And like I said, their only loss was to UCLA, and that was way early in the season. Now, I talk about the top 5 teams that played. LMU was another team that had a few matches here and there this past week. They obviously did not do well. Okay, I shouldn't say that. They actually lost to UCLA. I shouldn't say they obviously did not do well against UCLA. Like, UCLA and LMU faced one another, and unfortunately for LMU, they did not have the same result as they did last weekend. This time, UCLA clinched the match, or they clinched the meet after the third match was done. So, it was just a forgettable day for LMU overall after they lost to UCLA. And it didn't get any better, as Friday they actually lost to Long Beach State. But in LMU's defense, Long Beach State played such a tough and competitive schedule early on in the season, and I think that really speaks to high volumes for Long Beach State of how talented they could be. They did have a few close results with like Grand Canyon and Stanford, but I think for Long Beach State, it shows how they're starting to progress and come together. For LMU, this was kind of a couple of blips on the radar. They are picked to win the West Coast Conference Championship. I think they have that potential just because LMU is creating a foundation over in Los Angeles, and they're trying to be like UCLA and USC. They're kind of the third banana, but I feel they still have that potential. Do I think they can go deep in the tournament? Yes, I do. They obviously need to win their conference tournament or at least have a good showing. But I think their resume speaks for itself. I think they're amongst that 4 through 6 area in terms of seedings. But I'm no bracketologist. I'm just hopeful for LMU that they could get it together. I feel the Lions have potential, but for them, they're kind of going to need to step it up against some of these big and talented teams. Like last week, they had such a great week, and I felt that they took 10 steps forward. But this week, they kind of took 20 steps backward in terms of getting thumped by UCLA and then losing against Long Beach State. I feel that kind of took the wind out of LMU's sails. But then again, I think after coming off of a big weekend, you kind of get a little bit too high on those wins, where you have to find that inner balance. You cannot get too low. You cannot get too high. You have to find that inner balance. And last week I talked about the history of the NCAA Beach Volleyball NCAA Beach Volleyball. So NCAA Beach Volleyball Championships did not get sanctioned until 2016, when USC won the first official NCAA Beach Volleyball Championship. From 2012 all the way to 2015, there were AVCA Beach Volleyball Championships, as Pepperdine won one back in 2012, Long Beach State won one in 2013, Pepperdine won one again in 2014, and USC won one in 2015. So theoretically, USC has 4 beach volleyball championships. It's just that one of them isn't sanctioned. And then Pepperdine has 2 beach volleyball championships, but both of them are not NCAA sanctioned. Now, this is kind of comparable to, like, let's say the Chargers winning the 1961 NFL championship over the Boston Patriots. That's kind of the equivalent of the championship back in the day. Nowadays, it's all about Super Bowl. It's all about Lombardi. Anything past or before Lombardi, the Lombardi Trophy came out, doesn't mean anything. I disagree that when it comes to that AVCA thing. I think if you won the Beach Volleyball Championship back in 2012 all the way to 2015, I think it's a huge deal just because you were part of that early history. And overall, I think that you have a lot to be proud of. I think that trophy hanging in your office or sitting in your office or your Hall of Fame is something you need to be extremely proud of. And more importantly, I think for those teams that won it, such as Pepperdine and Long Beach State, I guess we'll throw USC in there just because they won. That was kind of their first ever championship in beach volleyball, even though it wasn't NCAA sanctioned. I think it's a memorabilia of what could come when it comes to your program. And it's basically just a memento of you being a part of early history. And eventually, the NCAA finally got it together when it came to making beach volleyball and other women's sports NCAA sanctioned. I think gymnastics was one of them, skiing was one of them, fencing was one of them, the list goes on and on. So, overall, beach volleyball, in terms of the NCAA, has evolved. And look at how many players are playing professionally. You have Sarah Hughes, you have Kelly Clays, you have Taryn Cloth, you have Kristen Nuss. The list goes on. And we're going to get more NCAA beach volleyball players eventually turning pro as well. We're eventually going to have more April Rosses and Alex Kleinmans because obviously April Ross and Alex Kleinman cannot play beach volleyball forever. It would be cool if they did, but it doesn't really work that way. So overall, NCAA beach volleyball has come a long way ever since 2012 all the way to 2015. Now I've got NCAA beach volleyball sanctioned championships, and it's all thanks to every program who did not cut their beach volleyball program and every team that has pretty much kept with it and helped grow the game. And every team that has pretty much brought on NCAA beach volleyball as an added sport for their team. So, or added sport for their varsity collegiate program. So overall, that's kind of your history of NCAA beach volleyball and how it kind of came to be. Speaking of NCAA volleyball news, there was news last week that Vanderbilt had pretty much revived its beach volleyball, or not its beach volleyball program, its indoor volleyball program, as after the 1979-1980 academic year, they pretty much cut the Vanderbilt volleyball program due to budget cuts. But now they're slated to bring back Vanderbilt women's volleyball in the 2025-2026 academic collegiate year, which is really great just because it does give the SEC more teams or more conference teams, and it does give the SEC more variety. Like, it's not just all about football or baseball or basketball. They're also going to add women's volleyball as well. And I'm really excited that Vanderbilt is going to have a team. Just because, obviously, it sucks to see a team shut down its program. But now, with the team being revived, it really is something to be happy about. Just because Vanderbilt does have some good programs at its school in terms of athletics. They have a really good baseball team. I think their basketball teams are fairly decent. Football team, not so much, but I digress on that. So overall, I'm happy for Vanderbilt and how they're growing the game of volleyball, and I can't wait to see what they can do. So that's pretty much all the NCAA women's volleyball news I pretty much had. Now we're going to jump to the 3C2A men's volleyball championship. So I'll actually start on Thursday with the semifinals. So Orange Coast took on Irvine Valley. And I'm just going to briefly summarize this. OCC swept IVC. Now, the first set, it looked as if IVC was going to win the match. Or they were going to take charge just because they got some strong serving from Colin Shillingworth. And he has pretty much been a stud for the Lasers all season long. His serving helped IVC run out to a 7-2 lead. And when it comes to Colin Shillingworth, he not only has a strong serve, he has a strong arm as well, as he can swing the ball really well, get kills off the block. Like, there's a reason why the bench at IVC chant Thanos when it comes to him serving. But I think for Colin Chillingworth, he has a bright future ahead of him if he wants to play at the 4-year level. I feel he should play 4-year level volleyball, but it's not entirely sure. But then Orange Coast, the sleeping giant that it is, woke up. And when you wake up a sleeping giant, it's a big, fat no-no. As OCC eventually took that first set, they kept up their strong toughness. They took the second set, and then they just dominated their way in the third set, which is quite impressive. I caught up with Ryan Windisch after the game. I didn't interview him. I basically just told him, since you're not in a good mood, I'll refrain from interviewing you. But he basically, in terms of OCC, he said these 3 simple words. They played great. And I understand. I totally respect the space of Ryan Windisch, and I'm not saying I wish I could have interviewed him. I basically knew he wasn't going to want to talk just because it's tough losing a match like that, especially to a rival. Keep in mind, Irvine Valley had pretty much gotten the better of Orange Coast the past 2 seasons. In 2021, they won the Orange Empire Conference Championship. And then in 2019, they knocked OCC out of the semifinals, which actually ended OCC's undefeated season. They were 22-0 going into that semifinals, and then Irvine Valley just socked it to them, which was very impressive. But overall, for Irvine Valley, it was a tough loss to the end of this tough season-ending loss for Irvine Valley. But they have a lot to be proud of. They were number 3 in the nation throughout 95% of the season. And overall, I feel that Irvine Valley has a bright future ahead of them. Ryan Windisch is doing an amazing job with that program. The future definitely looks bright, and I think Windisch has them going in the right direction. Now, Orange Coast advanced to the championship to play Long Beach City. So you're probably wondering why Orange Coast is so important. First of all, it's actually the school that I went to. Second of all, the head coach, Travis Turner, is actually a former guest on Set Point. And Ryan Windisch, the head coach of Irvine Valley, is also a former guest on Set Point. So overall, it was great to see both of those 2 teams face one another. I wish they could have met in the final, but for Orange Coast, they advanced to the championship to face Long Beach City. I was at this matchup, and oh my goodness, this was packed. There were over 300 people at that match, and believe it or not, and this is kind of a sad stat that I hate to have to bring up, there were more people at the 3C2A Men's Volleyball Championship than there were at the Mount Olive North Greenville matchup, which I hate to see. I really just do not like seeing that, and I hate to bring up that statistic. But overall, it kind of shows how popular volleyball is in California. I'm not trying to say volleyball is not popular in the Carolina states, but it just goes to show that volleyball is kind of a hotbed when it comes to California. As we say hello to Mike Pat, he says, I managed to chime in at the 11th hour, LOL. Thanks, Mike. I'm glad you tuned in. Definitely do check out Let's Whine About DMV Sports, which will be coming on at 6 p.m. Pacific Time, 9 p.m. Eastern. That's pretty much an hour and 30 minutes from now. But there's his plug right there. Once again, definitely do turn in your mock draft to Mike Pat. His Twitter account is linked in the description for those that want to participate. Back to the 3C2A men's volleyball final. So the first set, it was looking like OCC had the lead most of the way, but then Long Beach City started to come alive. They basically were answering all of OCC's problems. As anything that OCC started to throw at them, they were returning with twice the firepower. And overall, I thought that Long Beach did a great job in that first set. But for OCC, they were resilient as heck as they dug themselves out of I want to say it was 21-20 hole. They led 23-21, eventually led 23-22, and they took the first set 25-22. you gotta give credit to Long Beach City. They really performed well. It's just that OCC had a lot of terminating hitters when it came to their offense. Like, Will Anderson was a stud. Darius McRaven, who I'll be talking about in a little bit, was a stud. Cash Adamson was a stud. The list goes on and on. Now, the second set was a complete flip-flop. Long Beach took the lead at 9-5, and they eventually led 13-6. And I'm thinking, okay, looks like Long Beach City has officially arrived. They're going to take the second set. Well, I would have been right had it not been OCC, but Orange Coast, or OCC, was definitely on its A game. They slowly but surely chipped away at the lead. They eventually caught up to Long Beach City, and Long Beach was, I don't mean to say this in a negative way, but Long Beach was starting to get flustered a little. There were quite a bit of interesting calls when it came to some of the referees. I should also make note that there were 4 line judges at the 3C2A men's volleyball final, which is quite impressive. 4 line judges. You only need 2 to judge a match, but I thought it was really cool that they had 4 line judges and then a bottom head judge and then the top head judge who basically just overrides everything, but I digress. So, back to set 2. It looked as if it was going to be another back and forth set, but OCC used a 5-0 run to win the second set 25-21. I really was thinking that it was going to be Long Beach City pulling out the second set win. And if they pull off that second set win, they're feeling a whole lot better with themselves with the match being tied at 1-1. But now their backs are against the wall. Keep in mind Long Beach City was the number 1 seed, while OCC was the number 2 seed. Jumping over to set number 3, it looked as if Long Beach was going to have that set win. It looked like they were going to pull out a set and keep the match alive. They went up 11-6, and I'm thinking, okay, now Long Beach is going to probably take charge in this match. No. OCC, being resilient as they are, really socked it to them. They were down 11-6, but they eventually turned the tables with some well-timed blocks, some well-timed swings, and some well-timed serving as well. I have to give it up to Manning Lemoyne, who had such great short serves as well. Like, most of OCC serves tough. Like, they always have big jump serves that, like, it looks like it's getting shot out of a cannon. It's kind of like those basketball machine guns that you normally see, except it gets served at, like, twice the firepower, if not 5 times the firepower. Regardless, OCC was serving really tough. They were swinging the ball well. And just like the second set, they slowly but surely chipped away at the lead. And eventually they went up by as many as 8. They had championship point at 24-17. But to the credit of Long Beach City, they scored the next 5 points, and they were only down 2. And I'm thinking, my goodness. I was actually thinking this could be a major collapse if OCC doesn't win this set. But then Darius McRaven was able to put down the match-clinching kill, and the celebration was on as OCC was able to top Long Beach City in straight sets, winning the third set 25-22. And many are going to say that this was an upset. I don't think this was an upset at all, just because both of these teams were so evenly matched, and both these teams did not have a whole lot coming in between them. So, overall, I was really impressed with both teams. Orange Coast wins its 8th state championship as they were led by Will Anderson, bound for UC San Diego. He had 10 kills. Cash Adamson had 9 kills. Darius McRaven had 7 kills. And overall, those numbers don't really do it any justice, as Mike Pat is probably just in awe of Darius McRaven's name. Yeah, it's a pretty cool name if you ask me. Long Beach was led by Kobe Prouse and Julian Zavala, who each had 8 kills. Luke Bissell chipped in 6 kills. Eric Hernandez added 5 kills. As a team, Long Beach hit 220 while Orange Coast hit 247. What really hurt Long Beach was the serves. They did serve really well in the second set. They had 5 service aces, but they didn't have any other set where they had a good serving. I guess set 3, their serving was quite nice, but it wasn't nice enough. Nice does not win you matches against OCC. You have to be good or great. So overall, I thought Long Beach played well, but OCC definitely earned it. And for OCC, they had 8 service aces and only 6 missed serves. Now, obviously, OCC, with all of the jump serves that they have, they're going to be missing quite a bit of serves, but they limited that number, and that's very impressive. And overall, I thought Orange Coast just played a much cleaner game. What really hurt Long Beach was also the blocks. They got out blocked 10-3, which they cannot have that happening. If that happens, then they're not going to win a whole lot of games, because I know OCC has a lot of tall guys on their team. They range from like 6'6" to like 6'8", while Long Beach's players are like from the 6'3", 6'6" range. I'm not entirely certain, but overall, I thought Orange Coast really played a clean game. They limited their mistakes, and more importantly, they just outdid Long Beach in most of the areas, and I was quite impressed by them. After the game, and after all the chaos that was played at El Camino College, which is in Torrance, I caught up with Orange Coast College men's volleyball coach Travis Turner to talk about his team's win and winning Championship No. 8. All right, Travis, obviously this was a big win over the number 1 seed Long Beach City, but it was just a convincing win for the most part. What did your team do so perfectly against Long Beach City?
We didn't do anything perfectly, but I thought we blocked well and we served well. 8 aces with only 6 errors is a really good serving night for us. I thought Will and Grayson really served really well, and Cash, obviously. But mostly blocking and serving tonight, which is, we knew that was what we have to do well to beat them.
Darius McRaven had himself a big game in terms of blocking and hitting the ball. What can you say about Darius's big night?
Yeah, I think D's a competitor, man. He just wasn't going to let us lose. I thought Will was the same way, but D just stepped up at the right time. That was the best match of the year for him, and just played like a man. It was really fun to watch.
Now, obviously, you and Long Beach City are kind of the number 1, number 2 team. Like, what's it like facing Long Beach City as a rival and having them as a rival?
Well, I love playing them because you know what you're going to get every night. They come hard, and they're just well coached and well prepared always.
And then winning this championship, what's that feeling like, knowing that you were able to just pull out the win, and a couple of years after COVID happened, you're now state champions?
There's nothing like it, T. It's the best feeling in the world. I'm just stoked for these guys because I've done it a few times as a player and now as a coach, and so I just know what it can do and the friendships it creates and the lifelong, memories and friendships. It's just a deal.
And disregard that honking. It was just basically Travis just saying hello to other friends. So let's continue the interview. In the season for your team?
Not really. Hold
on. Let me ask that question one more time.
Better hurry.
And then obviously, was there any turning points in the season for your team?
Not really. I thought just all year the way we responded, you can see tonight, right? We responded all 3 sets when they kind of got after us, but we just responded. We kept responding all year, and I thought the key tonight was just responding, and I thought we did a great job of responding to the pressure they put on us.
So that was my post-game interview with Travis Turner. It was brief, but what can you do? I wanted to give Travis his moment to himself, and I want him to soak up this moment. So overall, he said it best. OCC's key to victory was responding, and they responded well against Long Beach City. Whatever Long Beach threw at them, they dished back. And I'll give Long Beach credit. They tried to do the same thing, but I thought Will Anderson, Cash Adamson, Darius McRaven, even the middles were doing great for the most part. And I also have to give credit to Joshua Friedman, who had himself a big game at the setter position. In OCC's only loss of the season, Joshua Friedman did not play that game, and I don't think Cash Adamson did not play as well. But I really have to give credit to Joshua Friedman. He performed really well, and I think for Joshua Friedman, he has a bright future ahead of him. I think he can play at the 4-year level. I'm not entirely certain if he's going to play at the 4-year level, but I feel he has that bright future as a setter to play at a 4-year university. So that is going to do it for the 3C2A men's volleyball portion of the show. Now, before we head on out of here, I have to break down the NCAA men's volleyball bracket. So this bracket was released today at 10 a.m. Pacific time, 1 p.m. Eastern, and then 7 a.m. Hawaii time. So we have to get down to the 2 at-large teams. So the teams that had already clinched a spot in the NCAA tournament were Princeton, North Greenville, Hawaii, Pepperdine, and Ball State. The first at-large team to make the NCAA tournament was, and can we get a drum roll, please? Long Beach State, as not only did they get an at-large spot, but they are named the number 1 seed of the NCAA men's volleyball tournament. Keep in mind, Long Beach State got swept in the Big West Conference men's volleyball tournament. That's how impressive and mind-boggling this whole process was, because between Long Beach State, UCLA, and Penn State, all 3 of those teams could not get in. One team was going to get left out, and Long Beach State, to everyone's surprise, was awarded the number 1 seed, despite not being number 1 for the most part of the season, and despite getting swept in their conference tournament final. Now for the second at-large team. So the second at-large team, rounding off the entire 7-team bracket of the NCAA men's volleyball tournament is, can we get a drum roll, please? UCLA, as they got an opening round bye, as they eventually will play Pepperdine in the second round. Now, I was told that there is no such thing as an official quarterfinal, and it's because there's only 7 teams in this tournament. It's really stupid, if you ask me. I don't care what anyone says. I think UCLA and Pepperdine are playing in a quarterfinal, because after that, there is the semifinals. I don't care what anyone says. It's a quarterfinal. Anyway, so UCLA is the other at-large team, and they will play Pepperdine. The whole tournament bracket consists of Princeton versus North Greenville in the opening round, which will be on May 1st. Then the winner of that matchup will play Hawaii on May 3rd. UCLA Pepperdine will face each other on May 3rd as well. And then the winner of UCLA Pepperdine will play Long Beach State. And then the winner of Hawaii Princeton/North Greenville will face Ball State in the semifinals. The semifinals are slated for Thursday, May 5th, while the final is slated for Saturday, May 7th, which is going to be big. All of the matches will be played at UCLA, aka Pauley Pavilion. Last year they did it for COVID purposes. Now they're doing the whole NCAA tournament at that site, which I think is pretty good and pretty fair. And I think it's really cool that they're doing the NCAA tournament at one whole site instead of having like multiple teams hosting. Now we gotta get into the team that did not make the tournament. The first one out was, without a doubt, Penn State. Now, many can make an argument for how Penn State should have been in the tournament. Penn State obviously had a lot of wins they had a lot of consecutive wins going into the EIVA semifinal. They had some impressive wins over Long Beach State. They had a tough schedule. They played USC, UCLA, UC Santa Barbara. They played BYU, Grand Canyon. The list goes on and on. Unfortunately for Penn State, what kind of held them back was kind of their conference schedule. Nothing against the EIVA, but none of those teams were really in the top 15 on a consistent basis. NJIT kind of was in the top 15 for a while, but unfortunately for them, they weren't in on a weekly basis compared to like some of these other teams from other conferences. And that's what I really think hurt Penn State, because it kind of reminds me of the NFC East, where the Dallas Cowboys pretty much just clobbered everybody in the conference, and then, or in the division. And then when it came to their wild card matchup against the San Francisco 49ers, they got caught with their pants down. So Penn State, I really feel bad for just because they had such a stacked team. They were in the top 5 throughout a majority of the year, and it really sucks that only that one team between Long Beach State, UCLA, and Penn State had to get left out. And unfortunately, Penn State was the odd man out, which I really do feel bad for. And it does not help that the committee had to take into consideration RPIs, strength of schedules, all that stuff. So it's a tough time for the players and the coaches who put in so much work. Remember, this is a Penn State team that returned all of its players from last year. All of its players. And majority of their starters, too. All their starters as well. Unfortunately, Penn State is basically on the outside looking in. I want to say the team that was also second, the second team out was probably USC. But they weren't going to get into the NCAA tournament just because they lost in the semifinals to Pepperdine. And I want to say Stanford was probably the third team out, but I think that honor probably went to UC Santa Barbara. So I feel bad for the kids. I was actually told by my buddy Jonathan Bates of Off the Block that the NCAA men's volleyball tournament should be expanded. But it's kind of tough when there's not a whole lot of teams to make the tournament. Like, I think it should be 8 teams, and then it should go quarterfinals, then semifinals, then finals. That outlaws any first round, second round buys. I really think that would be much better. I think 8 teams should get in and not 7. One Twitter follower that I saw suggested that there should have been a play-in matchup between Penn State and UCLA. But the problem with that was that UCLA and Penn State already faced one another, and then UCLA won that matchup. So I get it. That was all the way back in February when UCLA was playing solidly and Penn State was not playing well in California. But I think for Penn State, I just feel heartbroken for them just because I was all in when it came to them for the most part. Fortunately for Penn State, most of their players do come back. Will Bantle, their starting libero, does not come back. He's going to graduate and he'll probably play professionally. So I feel bad for Will Bantle, but I really hope that this motivates the players and coaches to make the NCAA tournament and to not take anyone for granted. I'm not saying that Penn State was taking anyone for granted, but this just goes to show you that the postseason, after the regular season, is a whole different animal. No one cares what you did in the regular season. No one cares if you went a perfect 16-0 in conference play. No one cares if you went undefeated in home games during the regular season. No one cares if you beat that team or that team. When it comes postseason conference play time or conference tournament time, it's a clean slate. 0-0. You basically have to win your way. And if you lose along the way, then that could pretty much cost your season. Unfortunately for Penn State, it kind of cost their season losing to Princeton. But again, the postseason is just such a different beast. And there was this old saying that I was told, like, you don't have to be the best team to win a tournament. You have to be the hottest team to win a tournament. And if you're playing hot as of late, then you'll obviously be able to get the win. Now, Princeton was kind of far from the hottest team. Like, Penn State was definitely the hottest team, but I think Princeton kind of caught Penn State on a bad night. Like, when you're dropping the first 2 sets, Penn State really needs to turn it around. Like, you can't be down 0-2 on your home floor and expect to reverse sweep your way back into the match. It's not a healthy and good recipe for success. And I think for Penn State, I feel they kind of put themselves in that hole against Princeton. But I think Penn State is going to come back twice as strong. I feel they're also going to have a better recruiting class, And I think the future looks bright for Penn State. They're obviously going to have to shake off this loss, and they're obviously going to have to find a new libero, depending on who that is. But a lot can happen in the span of 9 months. Like, we'll see what happens when it comes from now all the way to January of 2023. So that is going to do it for the NCAA Men's Volleyball Tournament portion of the show. And ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do it for Set Point. Without any further delay, let us drop that beat, because I'm about to dip like a banana in chocolate. You feel me? Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to Set Point. I really appreciate you. If you listen live, I appreciate you. If you listen on playback, I appreciate you. If you listen at work, I appreciate you. If you're listening in the wee hours of the morning, I definitely appreciate you. Big shout out to the chat room, Mike, Pat, Larry B, David Brooks, and Cale Henderson for tuning in and showing some love. I appreciate you. Appreciate everyone that has supported Set Point, because without you, Set Point doesn't amount to much. I will be back later on tonight, as I'll be back at 7 p.m. Pacific time for the SoCal Supreme Sports Show. Right now, in about 10 or so minutes, we have Fast Break with David Crooks and Terry Stock coming on. For everyone here at iSports Radio, this is Teran Rodriguez signing off. You all have yourself a great rest of the week. Enjoy the volleyball. And like I said, high school volleyball is pretty much coming to a close, as in terms of California, the postseason starts this week. Keep a lookout for that. So have yourself a great rest of the day, and I'll see you at 7 p.m. Pacific time. Peace!